A 25-year-old tight end that Baltimore just let slip away through a decision that has the entire league scratching their heads. Meanwhile, an offensive weapon that had been missing for 3 months is finally ready to return. And the secondary just lost a key piece after an unexpected request. 3 moves that could define the closing stretch of the season and the immediate future of this team. This is what you need to know right now. The Washington organization has a golden opportunity right in front of their faces, and Adam Peters knows it perfectly. Isaiah Likely, the 25-year-old tight end from the Baltimore Ravens, could become a free agent after this season, and all thanks to a baffling decision by Baltimore's front office. With Charlie Kolar also emerging on the roster, Baltimore simply doesn't have the salary cap space to retain both high-level tight ends. Here is the data point that should make Peters jump out of his chair. The franchise tag for tight ends is projected around $16 million due to math. Baltimore would have to sacrifice important pieces at other positions just to keep Likely. He's a proven player who has demonstrated he can produce at a high level even as the second option. This guy is only 25 years old and has already shown the ability to create explosive plays after the catch. Exactly the type of threat that has been absent in Washington for years. A young athletic tight end who can stretch the field vertically and turn short receptions into massive gains. The situation becomes even more favorable when you analyze Washington's needs. Zach Ertz is probably playing his final season before retirement. Likely fits perfectly into that mold. They wouldn't have to use one of their scarce 6 draft picks from 2026 on a tight end, allowing them to focus on other critical needs like offensive line, secondary, and pass rush, which is extremely reasonable in today's market. More importantly, his impact on the salary cap in the first year will be in the low single digits, giving Peters flexibility to make other aggressive moves in free agency. And as a young quarterback who needs explosive weapons to continue developing at the highest level, the competitive advantage here is obvious. Imagine the playing field. Terry McLaurin on one side, Deebo Samuel on the other, and Likely creating problems through the middle of the field. That's a coverage nightmare for any defensive coordinator in the league. This is exactly the type of opportunity that a smart general manager doesn't let pass. A young, proven player available because his current team made a questionable financial decision. Now Washington can capitalize on that mistake and land one of the most promising tight ends in the league. The reality is simple. If the Commanders are serious about building around Daniels and creating a modern explosive offense, Isaiah Likely must be at the top of their target list. Not every day does a 25-year-old tight end with his talent hit the open market. This is one of those situations where timing, need, and opportunity align perfectly. Peters needs to be on the phone the first second free agency begins. But there's more to this story than just numbers and salary projections. He can play as a traditional inline tight end. He can split out as a slot receiver. And he can even line up outside when the scheme requires it. That versatility is invaluable in the modern NFL where offensive coordinators look to create matchup problems for defenses. Likely has shown flashes of brilliance even with limited time as the second option. His numbers aren't explosive because he simply hasn't had the volume of targets he would deserve as a starter. But when Hayes been given the opportunity, Hayes responded. His yards after catch are impressive. His ability to break tackles is real. And his speed for a player his size is exceptional. Let's compare this to what Washington currently has. Ertz has been a consummate professional and has provided veteran leadership, but his days as an explosive athletic threat are long gone. The other tight ends on the roster are depth players who don't represent real threats in the passing game. Washington desperately needs a tight end who can be a reliable safety valve for Daniels and also a legitimate vertical threat that forces defenses to respect him. The connection between Daniels and Likely could be devastating for opposing defenses. Daniels has shown during his rookie season that he has the arm and vision to find his tight ends in the seams of zones. Adding an athlete like Likely who can separate from linebackers and safeties would be a massive upgrade. Think about what Travis Kelce has meant to Patrick Mahomes, or what George Kittle has been for San Francisco quarterbacks. Likely has that type of impact potential. Additionally, Likely's presence would open up the field for the other receivers. Defenses couldn't simply focus on shutting down McLaurin and Samuel if there's a dangerous tight end operating through the middle. That would create more one-on-one opportunities on the perimeter, exactly the type of situations where McLaurin and Samuel thrive. It's a domino effect that would elevate the entire offense. From a Daniels development perspective, having a reliable tight end is crucial. The best young quarterbacks in the league all have reliable weapons at the tight end position. Joe Burrow has Mike Gesicki and Irv Smith Jr. Justin Herbert had Gerald Everett. Trevor Lawrence has Evan Engram. The window of competitiveness in the NFL is short and unpredictable. Washington has a franchise quarterback on a rookie contract, which gives them massive financial flexibility to build a competitive roster around him. Likely represents exactly that type of smart and aggressive move. And let's not forget the divisional factor. Baltimore is in the same conference. If Washington can take a talented player away from a conference rival while improving their own roster, that's a double win. Those types of moves are what separate good general managers from great ones. Peters needs to act fast and decisive when free agency opens. Likely is going to have multiple teams interested. Geographic proximity, an exciting young quarterback, a new regime with Dan Quinn that's building something special. But they need to close the deal. They can't let this opportunity slip away. What do you think about this potential move? Should Peters go all in for Likely? Leave us your comment below. News 2. Noah Brown. The return after 3 months, Noah Brown is finally back. And not a second too soon for this offense that has been operating with its hands tied for months. The last time we saw Brown on the field was almost 3 months ago in Week 2 against Green Bay, that Thursday night, and since then it's been 10 complete games of absence. That's coach language for saying Brown is ready to go. Brown himself shared the same sentiment, saying he had a good practice day and just wants to keep that momentum until Sunday. After 3 months of frustration, there's finally light at the end of the tunnel. Not necessarily because of physical severity, but because of the fickle nature of soft tissue injuries. These injuries aren't like a broken bone where you have a clear recovery timeline. They're unpredictable, frustrating, and can have setbacks at any moment without prior warning. Brown was close to returning about a month ago before suffering a setback that cost him even more time than had already lost. Just when the team is starting to regain health at key positions, with McLaurin and Will Harris returning last week against Denver. Now Brown joins that group of returning players. With a 3-9 record, Washington is 1 loss away from being officially eliminated from the postseason. What he could improve from this situation? Now comes the exciting part. Brown returning means we'll finally see what this offense can do when it's fully armed. McLaurin, Samuel, and Brown on the field at the same time. Brown isn't being shy about what that means for opposing defenses. He knows that when those three are together on the field, it's a problem for defenses in multiple ways. It's not just about receptions and yards. It's about creating impossible situations for defensive coordinators. Marcus Mariota highlighted one of the most underrated aspects of Brown's game. He's a savvy receiver who understands body positions and how to create defensive fouls. You learn how to put yourself in positions where defenders have no choice but to commit a penalty. Brown has perfected that art over time, and those flags help the offense as much as a reception in most situations. They're free yards, automatic first downs, and they keep drives alive. But they're also an opportunity for veterans like Brown to prove they still have gas in the tank. At 32 years old, Brown isn't here to be a transitional piece. He's here to be a legitimate contributor on an offense that has ambitions of being elite next year. We've seen practice squad players being elevated, schemes being simplified, and Daniels having to work magic with limited options. Finally, the group is regaining health. It may not erase the struggles of the recent past, but a little dangerous play from the offense, thanks to its returning weapons, could produce some fun moments before it's all said and done. Brown brings something that can't be taught: experience and football knowledge. Brown knows how to find soft spots in zones, knows how to adjust routes against man coverage, knows how to use his body to shield the ball in traffic situations. During his absence, Washington has had to rely more on young and inexperienced receivers. Those players have done the best they can. His return not only adds another reliable target for Daniels, it also elevates the level of play of all the other receivers on the field. Young players can learn from how he positions himself, how he runs his routes, how he communicates in the huddle. These injuries affect a player's ability to plant and cut, which is fundamental for creating separation. The fact that Quinn is so confident about Brown's return is a positive sign that the medical staff is satisfied with his progress and his current physical condition. For Daniels, having Brown back is a gift. Another reliable target, another veteran who can read defenses and adjust in real time, allows him to distribute the ball and not rely too heavily on one or two people. A balanced defense with multiple threats is much harder to defend. The timing of Brown's return is also interesting. Minnesota has a solid defense, especially in the secondary. They can create favorable matchups. They can force Minnesota to make tough decisions about their defensive packages. The final 5 games of the season aren't about playoffs for Washington. They're about establishing identity and building momentum. Brown returning and showing he can still contribute at a high level is part of that evaluation. Brown has been professional throughout this entire process. He hasn't complained publicly. He hasn't pointed fingers. He hasn't created drama. He's kept his head down, done his rehab, supported his teammates from the sideline. That type of attitude is what builds winning culture. Brown's return also relieves some pressure off McLaurin and Samuel. News 3. Darnell Savage, released after player request. The Commanders had to deal with an unexpected problem that led to the release of a hopeful player. After a heartbreaking loss to the Denver Broncos, Washington had a new problem to worry about, with Darnell Savage requesting his release from the team, and the organization granted his wish without much resistance. The situation began when safety Will Harris finally returned from an injury he had suffered in Week 3, when he fractured his fibula. His return forced a tough decision in the secondary, and head coach Dan Quinn decided to make Savage a healthy scratch against the Broncos. As expected, Savage didn't like that decision too much. After being out on Sunday, he requested his release from the team, which they have now granted. Savage had filled the void left by Harris and had done a solid job as a new addition who didn't get an off-season to learn the defense. There were a lot of high hopes for Savage when he arrived during the season, especially because he came from Green Bay, where he had been a starter and had shown potential. But in the end, it simply didn't work out as everyone expected. The entire secondary has struggled this season with Harris out, and it was surprising to see Savage as an inactive, even with Harris' return, especially considering Hayes only 28 years old and still has a lot of football ahead of him. The week before the Denver game, Quinn had drastically reduced Quan Martin's snaps, generating speculation that Martin was losing his job to Savage. But against Denver, Quinn decided to give Martin more playing time again while making Savage inactive. It seems Quinn isn't ready to give up on Martin yet, and he's possibly leaning more toward youth and the guys they drafted. That's a risky bet considering how Martin has played this season, but Quinn clearly sees something they're worth developing. Savage was at least serviceable on the field. He was better in coverage than Martin, had more experience reading quarterbacks, and is still only 28 years old, which means Hayes in his athletic prime. He played his best game of the season against the Miami Dolphins and looked to be taking Martin's spot permanently. But that changed drastically just the next week when Quinn made him inactive. It's hard to understand the logic behind making Savage a healthy scratch, when the secondary has been one of the worst performing groups on the team throughout the entire season. Quinn is putting all his betting chips on Martin for the rest of the season, and now it's up to him to prove it was the right call. The Commanders will still look to improve the safety room this offseason, with players like Caleb Downs potentially available in the draft, but having Martin as a solid rotational piece who could even line up closer to the line would be beneficial. The final 5 games are a test for many young players on the roster, and Martin is high on that list after a disappointing season. The decision to release Savage also speaks to the culture Quinn is trying to build. If a player doesn't want to be here, if he's not committed to the program, they're not going to force him to stay. That sends a clear message to the rest of the locker room about commitment and mentality. Everyone in that building needs to be fully committed to the mission, or there's no place for them. That type of standard is important when you're building a winning culture from scratch. But it also raises questions about why the situation reached this point in the first place. Was it a lack of communication between Quinn and Savage about the role he would have when Harris returned? Should Quinn have been clear about his plans with Savage from the beginning? Did Savage have unrealistic expectations about his role on the team? These are legitimate questions that the organization is probably reflecting on internally. The reality is that Washington's secondary has been a disaster this year. They're allowing big plays constantly, they're missing assignments at critical moments, and they're simply not making the plays they need to make to win games. Savage wasn't the solution to all those problems. Nobody's saying he was. But he was a more reliable and experienced option than what Martin has shown. Now Quinn is betting that Martin can improve dramatically in the final 5 games and justify this decision. For Savage, this is probably a blessing in disguise long term. He can now sign with a contending team that needs safety depth and potentially contribute to a playoff run. There are several teams in the league dealing with injuries in the secondary or who simply need more depth for the final stretch. Savage can land in a better place where he has a real opportunity to contribute and help a team win important games. For Washington, it's another sign that this season is about evaluation and development, not immediate results. Quinn is making decisions with the long-term future in mind, even if that means some uncomfortable moments in the short term. Hayes prioritizing the development of young players, who could be part of the team's core in the coming years over veterans who probably won't be here anyway. The situation also highlights the importance of communication in a sports organization. When a player reaches the point of requesting his release, something broke down in communication somewhere along the way. Whether Savage felt he wasn't being treated fairly or his expectations weren't aligned with the reality of his situation, someone dropped the ball in keeping everyone on the same page. Quinn is known for being a strong communicator, someone who values relationships with his players. The fact that this situation escalated to the point of a release request suggests there was a significant disconnect. That's something Quinn and his staff will need to learn from and improve as they continue building this program. From a roster perspective, releasing Savage opens up a spot that Washington can use to elevate another player or sign someone from outside if a need arises. With 5 games remaining and multiple players dealing with minor injuries, having that roster flexibility could be useful. It also gives the team the opportunity to look at younger players from the practice squad who might deserve an evaluation in real games. The secondary remains a massive priority for the offseason. Washington needs to invest significant resources in that area, whether through the draft, free agency, or both. They need players who can cover, who can tackle in space, who can communicate effectively and maintain the integrity of the defensive scheme. Martin still has time to prove he can be part of that solution, but he needs to show dramatic improvement in these final games. 3 stories that define Washington's current moment. A free agency target who could transform the offense and give Jaden Daniels the weapon he needs to take the next step. A veteran receiver returning after 3 months of absence and frustration, ready to help build momentum toward the future. And an unexpected release that raises questions about communication and direction of the secondary, but also shows Quinn is committed to his long-term vision. The final 5 games of the season aren't about playoffs. They're about establishing the foundation for 2026. Adam Peters has important work to do in the offseason. Dan Quinn has critical decisions to make about his roster. And players have to prove they deserve to be here long term. If you want to be the first to know the latest news firsthand before anyone else, subscribe right now.